Hello, fellow YouTubers. Chris Parker here with Parker Photographic with a new, fun, and exciting tutorial for GIMP users. I'm going to show you how to instantly add snow to your images with 3 free snow overlays. Plus, I'm going to show you how to create your own snow brushes. And then you're going to create your own snow overlays with that snow brush that I'm going to show you how to make. So if you're ready to get started and learn how to add snow to your photos in GIMP, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is find a photo that we want to work with. I'm not a huge fan of shooting in the snow, in the winter, in the cold. I prefer warmth. So I'm using stock images, and this is the image that I used in the beginning of the tutorial, but the original image already has snow to it. So I went ahead and picked out a different image that does not have any snow on it. So I prefer to work with this image instead since it doesn't have any snow. The other thing you want to consider is the context of the image that you're using. For example, in this photo, we have a backlit image and the sun is shining through right here. So adding snow to an image like this may not look realistic because you're adding snow on a sunny day. I understand there's sometimes when you have the sun peeping through the clouds, even though it's still snowing, that's a possibility. But for a more realistic and natural type of look, especially when you're doing composites like this, you want to make sure that what you're adding coincides with the image that you're using. But I didn't want to spend a lot of time searching for images, so I just found this one real quick, and we're going to go ahead and just use this one as an example. All right, now that I've explained all of that, so what you want to do next is download the free snow overlays that I've included from my collection. In the descriptions below this video, you will find a link to download those 3 snow overlays. Once you unzip them, you're going to find those 3 inside this folder here, and then you can just click and drag any one of them onto your image. Once you do that, depending on the size of your image, you may need to resize the snow overlay layer in order to match your image. So if I zoom out here, we can see the outline of the actual snow overlay is much larger than the image. I have my ruler set up and I can actually see that the width of the image is around 1900 pixels wide. So we're going to resize this snow layer to match the dimensions of the image much more closely. So we're going to right click on the image and then we're going to scroll down to Layer, select Scale Layer, and then go ahead and type in the width that matches or closely resembles the width of your image. I'm going to do 2000. So once you have the width in place, go ahead and click Scale, and then that snow overlay will scale down closer to the size of the image based on the number that you inputted. So here's our snow. Doesn't look like much yet because we can't really see our image. So what we need to do is select a blending mode to blend this in with the image layer below it. So we're going to go up to Mode, and we're going to scroll down and select Screen, and that's going to remove all the black from that layer, and then we're just left with the snow. From here you can change the opacity if you want to tone it down a bit. You can also blur the snow out a little bit more if you want. Go up to Filters, Blur, select Gaussian Blur, and then just type in an amount. So I think I'm going to bring this up to around 8 pixels for horizontal and vertical. I'm going to click OK. GIMP is going to blur that snow even more than it was before, and that helps blend it in a little bit more. Now, if you have a person in your image like this and you want to remove the snow from the face, you could use your eraser tool to remove that snow directly from the layer, but I prefer to work non-destructively. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click, select Add Layer Mask, make sure you have white selected, click Add, and as you know, white add, black removes. So now we're going to grab our brush with the letter B. Now I just want to mention I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts throughout this video, but I have set up my GIMP interface and some of the tools to better match Photoshop. So that's why my interface probably looks different than yours if you haven't used the Photoshop theme. And I've also changed some of my tools and functions to match the same keyboard shortcuts that we use in Photoshop. So for me, the letter B selects the brush. It might be something different for you. So just keep that in mind throughout this tutorial. If I say a specific keyboard shortcut, it might be slightly different for you. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my brush size. I'm using my right bracket key to increase that. And then I can paint with black to remove snow from the areas where I don't want it. So this allows me to work non-destructively, because if I save this as a layered file, I can come back to it and add that snow back by painting with white. If I press the letter X, my foreground and background colors will switch, or I can just come over here and click on these little double arrows right here, and then I can paint that snow back on. So that's how you use the free snow overlays to add instant snow. Now real quick, let me show you something else that you can do. You can actually add a motion blur to the snow as well, some additional character if you want to make it look a little bit more realistic. We're going to go back up to Filters, Blur, Motion Blur, and then you can set the length of the snow and the angle of the snow. So 90 degrees would be pretty much from top to bottom. 45-degree angles, of course, would be at an angle. So I'm just going to do around 80 for the angle and around 50 for the length. And that's going to be the length of the snow from top to bottom. So once we click OK, GIMP is going to do its thing. And depending on the speed of your computer and the size of your image will determine how long it takes in order for that to work. Now that time it didn't work because I had my layer mask selected. So make sure you have the correct thumbnail selected in the layer before applying that motion blur or additional blur or any other effects that you're applying to it. So let's go back up to Filters, Blur, and Motion Blur. And let's go ahead and click OK. Alright, so now we have some motion blur added to the snow. So if you want to create that type of effect, you can use the motion blur tool to do that. Alright, let's go ahead and save this file. And you want to make sure you have the extension XCF, which is GIMP's file format for saving files with layers. If you save it as a JPEG, then it's going to flatten the image. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab this layer, drag it to the trash can to delete it so we can start over and create our own snow brushes, and then I'll show you how to create your own snow layers. Okay, I'm going to resize this image to fit my interface, and to do that we have a keyboard shortcut, which is Shift, Control, and the letter J. So that resizes the image to fit our interface. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new document so we can create our snow brushes. So we can use Command or Control and the letter N, get our Create a New Image dialog box, and then from here we'll just go ahead and create a square document. Let's do 800 by 800. And then under Advanced Options, we want to make sure that the background is filled with transparency. We do not want any color on the background, so make sure you select that, click OK, and then we'll go ahead and get started making our new brush. So with the letter B, we're going to grab our brush tool. I'm going to increase this to around 300. That looks like a good size. And I do have my dynamics set to something custom, so I'm going to go back up and select Basic Dynamics. And let's go ahead and select a hard-edged brush. I know snow doesn't have a hard edge, but we'll make adjustments to our snow once we apply it. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure that we have our white color selected for our foreground. Alright, so once you have all those settings set up, just go ahead and place a circle in one of the four corners. Doesn't matter which one. I'm just going to place mine right here. And that's our first snow element. What we're going to do is add a second one, so we can add a little bit of variety to our snow so it looks a little bit more natural, and this is going to make more sense once we start brushing on our snow. So I'm going to put this one around 140, 150. Doesn't matter the size, just go ahead and make one that's smaller. And I tend to find that the opposite corner typically works better just for more variety. So I'm going to go ahead and place mine right here. I'm going to place it off center, and then we have 2 snowflakes. So now what we need to do is we need to convert this to a brush. All right, now that I think about it, we can't actually save it as a brush. What we have to do is we have to export it as a brush. So we're going to go up to File, Export As. I'm going to give it a name of snow, and then we want to make sure that we have the correct file type selected. So we're going to click on this little icon here, select File Type, and then we're going to scroll down and look for GIMP Brush. And this is going to add the extension GBR, which is the extension for, well, GIMP brushes. Then you need to make sure that you export this to the correct folder. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So we're going to go to our local disk here. Your setup's probably going to look different because I am on a Mac computer working under parallel. So I do have a Windows system set up on my Mac, so your folder structure probably looks different than mine. But once you get to the main disk, you want to go to Users, select the username of your computer, select the GIMP 2.8 folder, then select the brushes folder, and then you're going to save your snow inside of this folder. So once you have that, click Export, and then GIMP will ask you another question. Just keep the defaults for now. Click Export, and then it's going to export this particular document as a brush into that folder. And then, in order to access it in the GIMP interface, we need to go back to the brush tool options here. And then we need to go down and click on this refresh brushes icon. GIMP will refresh it, and then it's going to add it to your brush tool options here. And then if we click in this area here, we can see that we have a GIMP brush, which is 800 by 800, which is the one we just created. And it's hard to see because you have white on white. So that's why we give it a name, but GIMP for some reason doesn't add the name. This is actually the description of the brush. So just locate this description that includes the size that you created for that document. In this case, it was 800 by 800. So I know I have the correct brush selected. Let's go back to our image and paint on some snow. Well, we're painting on snow, but it doesn't look like snow. So what we're going to do is make some adjustments to our tool options in order to help it look more natural. And to do that, we're going to head on over to our tool options for our brushes. And we're going to make some selections here to help add some randomness to the snow to help it look much more natural. So one of the first things we want to change is the dynamics of the brush. Right now when we apply the brush, we're just adding 2 snowflakes in a constant line based on how we apply that paintbrush to the canvas. If we change the dynamics to dynamics random, it's going to randomly add those snowflakes in different positions at different opacities and randomly place the snowflakes at different distances from each other. And this is going to help the snow look much more natural by randomly applying snow in those different sizes and the other settings that are being applied. So now when I click and drag, we can see that the snow is much more random than it was before. Now to undo this, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter Z, and that's going to remove the snow. Now the other thing we may want to do is adjust the aspect ratio, which is going to change the snow from perfectly round to more of an oval shape. And as you know, snowflakes aren't perfectly round, at least not where I come from. So we can change the aspect ratio anywhere from -3 to +3. It doesn't really matter, whatever works for you. And that's just going to break up the snow just a little bit more and make it a little bit more natural. The next brush tool you may want to consider to help add some more randomness to the snow is to apply the jitter option, and anything above 0 will increase the spacing between the snow, and the higher you go, the greater the distance between the snow. So 50 is the maximum. I'm going to put it at around 25, and then we can see that the snow is being scattered further away from each other, and that adds more randomness to the snow that we're applying. Okay, so once you have your tool brush options set up, the next thing we want to do is make sure that we're working non-destructively again. So we're going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to name it Snow 1. It's going to add the actual width and height of the current document that you're working on, so you don't have to worry about that. And we want to make sure that the layer fill type is set to transparency. So if you have something else, make sure you have transparency selected. Click OK, and then a new layer is added. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 3 different layers of snow so we can create depth to the image, because the snow is going to be at different sizes and have a different amount of blurriness to them or sharpness to them based on where the snow is falling. As you can see in the background, it's blurred out. So the snow back here is going to be much more blurred out and less visible versus what's falling closer to our subject or even what's falling near the camera. What's falling near the camera will be more in focus, but then again, that depends on the aperture setting that you're using for your lens. You have to keep that into consideration as well. But also, the closer to the lens, that snow is going to be much larger versus what's going on in the background. So we can create 3 different layers of snow at different sizes with a different amount of blurriness to help create that depth, and that's what we're going to do. So let's start off with a large snow brush so we can apply the snow that's closest to the camera. And I'm going to set my brush size to around 800, and then I'm just going to randomly place some snow in some different areas here. Now what I want to do is I want to blur out this snow a little bit so it's not as sharp and to help it look much more natural. So I'm going to set my Gaussian blur to, let's do it right around 35. I'm going to click OK and see what that looks like. All right, so that looks pretty good. It's probably a little bit too much, especially this snowflake right here. I'm not liking this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to erase this snowflake later. I could do it now, but if I select my eraser tool, I'll still be on my snowflake brush from my tool options panel here. And then I have to go in and readjust all my dynamic settings and my jitter and all that back to the default settings. And then I would have to go back and readjust them again for the brushes. So I'm just going to save that for the end of the tutorial to make those adjustments. The other thing we could do is we could rotate this particular layer so that the snow changes position. So we're going to right click and try that out. So go to Layer, Transform, and select Flip horizontally. So that just changes the position of the snow. I'm still not liking this big one on her sweater here. So I'm going to undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z, and we'll take care of that snowflake later on. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. Name it Snow 2. Click OK to add the layer. Now we're going to create some more depth by using a smaller brush. I'm going to bring this down to around 300. Let's go ahead and turn off this first snow layer so we can better see the new snow that we're going to apply. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply some snow in this area here. And again, we're getting some snow on the face. I probably don't want that there. So again, we'll fix that later on. Let's go ahead and add some blur to it. We're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Because it is closer to our subject, it needs to be a little bit sharper. So we're going to bring this down to around 15 or 12, something in that range. I'm going to click OK. Personally, I'm not liking this little cluster down here, and it does look a little fake. So I want to add a little motion blur to it just to break it up a little bit. We're going to go back up to Filters, Blur, Motion Blur, and let's change the length to around 18. I'm going to keep the angle at around 80. And let's see what that looks like. All right, I'm going to undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z. It's just a balancing act, going back and forth until you find something that you're happy with. I'm not really liking that motion blur, so I'm going to add some more length to it. I'm going to bring it back up to around 40, and let's see what that looks like. All right, so I'm liking that a lot better. It's adding a lot more interest by adding that motion blur to it. Some of these snowflakes are a little bit too bright for me, so I'm going to bring the opacity down just to blend it in a little bit, and I'm liking that right there. Let's go ahead and turn this layer off, and let's go ahead and create our third snow layer. So this time the snow is going to be much smaller because it's going to be in the background, and we want to make sure that we're not applying snow around our subject. Otherwise, it's going to look like the snow is in front of her. We want the snow to be behind her, so again, we're going to have to erase some of that snow once we're done. So let's bring the size of the brush down to around 100. And then I'm just going to click and randomly add it. I'm not liking the size. I want it actually smaller. So I'm going to bring this brush down to around 25. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Much smaller. It is getting on our subject, but that's okay. We're going to erase some of that once we're done with the addition of all our snow. Let's go ahead and drop the opacity down of this one as well. Actually, let's blur it out first because that's going to help blend it in a little bit better. So Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and then I'm going to bring this one up really high to around 75. That's too much. It actually got rid of the snow altogether. So let's go back to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and let's bring this down to around 50. Too much again. Again, it's just a balancing act until you find something that works for the image that you're working on. I'm going to bring this down to 30 this time. We can kind of see it in here, but not enough for me. I want to bring back some of the detail, so we'll try it one more time. Hopefully this time it works. We're going to do 20. All right, so that helps keep the snow visible, but it blurs it out to the point that it does look like it's back here in the back. We just need to remove some of it from our subject so it doesn't look like that it's in front of her. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on our layer, select Add Layer Mask. We want white because white adds, black removes, and we want to keep all the snow, and we're going to paint with black to remove it. So we're going to click Add. We're going to switch our foreground colors from white to black with the letter X. Now we need to select a new brush. I'm going to select this soft edged brush here. And then we're going to change our tool options again, so we're not adding this randomness that we did before. So we're going to select our basic dynamics, deactivate the apply jitter, and then we're just going to use a larger brush to make sure that we cover a larger area. Aspect ratio, I'm going to put that back to 0 or close to it. And then when I paint with black, I can remove that snow from the areas where I don't want it. Now, of course, we could have small snowflakes in front of her as well as part of the other layers as well. But I'm just showing this to you so you can see the different methods you can use to help it look as natural as possible. Let's go ahead and turn on this snow layer as well. We're going to add a layer mask to this one as well. And let's go ahead and remove some of this snow. And of course, if you remove too much snow, you can always paint it back with white, which I'm going to do in some of these areas here. It's just this big cluster right here that I'm not liking. All right, let's go ahead and turn this layer on, and then let's add a layer mask to this one as well. This big one right here I'm not really fond of, so we'll go ahead and remove that one. All right, so now that we have all 3 snow layers applied, actually there's a little snow on the face here I don't want, so I can remove that as well. There we go. Okay, now that we have all 3 snow layers, let's go ahead and group them. I'm going to select the top layer, right click, and select New Layer Group. And then I can drag each layer into this group, and this helps organize all the different layers that we're working with. And of course, we can easily see the before and after by turning this new group layer on or off. And the other reason why we grouped it is because we're going to create our new snow overlay with this grouped layer. So to do that, we're going to create a new layer. Let's make sure that the bottom image layer is selected so that the layer is placed above it. And we want a black background. And because I do have black set for my foreground, I'm going to select foreground color, click OK, and then we have that black background applied below the layer group. And when you save this as a JPEG file, you can then add that snow just like we did in the beginning of the tutorial where we dragged and dropped the JPEG file onto our document. And then by applying the screen overlay in the blending mode, it will remove that black. I'm going to actually put it in this group layer here. And we can change it to screen, and it's going to remove that black and show the snow through it. And that's how you're going to add your snow overlays to your images. So go ahead and create some snow brushes, create some snow overlays. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If so, please leave a comment below. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And I will continue adding more and more video tutorials all about GIMP. If there's interest and we get a lot of comments, then I'll know that there is an interest to learn more about GIMP. And if you have a special request, please post it in the comments and I will add it to the ever-growing list of video tutorials that I hope to add throughout this year and many years to come. Thanks for listening and have an awesome day.